Hi, this is Catherine Skinner of the Educopia Institute. This workshop recording and all of its accompanying material is openly and freely available as part of a research project undertaken by the Educopia Institute with Carnegie Mellon University, Colorado State University, Indiana State University, the Morehouse School of Medicine, Oregon State University, Penn State University, Purdue University, the University of Louisville, University of North Texas, University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and Virginia Tech University. It has been generously funded by the Institute of Museum and Library Services. This workshop has been designed to provide you with resources and tools to help you to know how to handle file format decisions as a researcher, particularly regarding your research outputs. This workshop is part of a 6-workshop series on topics related to the preservation and curation of research data and complex digital objects. You can access the workshops and their accompanying briefs at https://educopia.org/research/etd+, as you see on your screen. So in terms of the context for this workshop, electronic theses and dissertations used to be largely PDFs. And increasingly, students report today that non-PDF files are just as important or are more important research outputs and evidence for their cumulative projects. As you create your research files, whatever their type may be, whether they're image files, sound files, video, or data sets, you're going to need to consider what might happen if you can no longer use the software you have access to as a student. So whether the software publisher goes bankrupt, or the latest version refuses to read older data, or you can't afford a personal license for it after you graduate, the end result is the same. If you lose access to your software, that can mean losing your data, especially if it's the only software that can read your data. So file formats give shape to the way that you store and use your data. Different file formats let you use the same information in different ways. So for example, when you submit your thesis or your dissertation, you will likely do so as a PDF file so that it will look the same on every computer screen. But as you're writing and editing, you'll probably use a range of different formats. And depending on the software you use, you might notice different extensions at the end of your file name, such as docx for Microsoft Word, for example. You also may notice a different icon for different file types. Now, there are some key concepts regarding file formats that this workshop is going to help you understand and help you know how to address in your own work. So first and foremost, it's going to help you understand that you have a range of file format options and that every choice you make has implications for future use and access. It'll also teach you that there are tools available that will help you to archive particularly challenging file types, for example, web pages. And then finally, it's going to help you to understand how to reduce your risk by using export and save as functions. So when we think about file formats, there really is no perfect file format. Every file format has advantages and disadvantages depending on what your research use might be. But it's important to find a file format or a set of file formats that helps you complete your research now and that you can also access again in the future dependably. And this is true both for your research outputs, so what you create, and then also for your research inputs, so the materials that you use in your research process. To drive this home, think, for example, of 20 years ago and Word programs like WordPerfect or WordStar. People used these in fairly large numbers at one point in time. Those are no longer available. And so for those who still have WordStar or WordPerfect files trapped usually on 3.5-inch floppies or other types of early devices, those file formats aren't going to do anything for them if they just pop it in and try to open it in Microsoft Word or in Google Docs. So thinking about the longevity of your file format is really, really important. And the ones that are listed here are some of the ones that you might run into and that you might be using in your own work today. But ultimately, what I want to drive home is that the file formats that you choose those are going to determine how easy or how difficult your research outputs are to access and build upon in the future. So how do you choose? File formats are often bundled with and determined by the software that you choose to use in your research. So it's important to understand what formats each of your chosen software packages will both save to and open, especially if multiple pieces of software are going to be used during the research process. So for example, Microsoft Office or SPSS or Adobe Photoshop, these might all be things that you are using or that your colleagues are using. So ultimately, what you want to be looking for is software that both imports and exports data in common formats. So there are lots of disciplines that have default formats that are used and sometimes are recommended by practitioners. And following the community practice that is there in your field means that the challenges you might face with your own choice of format are also problems that others are likely to have already faced and probably solved. It also enables easier collaboration with others since you don't have to migrate data from one format to another in order to exchange it with one of your colleagues. So one of the things that you'll want to do is be sure to ask advisors and colleagues what formats they're using and what software packages they're using. How you're going to use the data is another consideration as you're choosing your formats. So if you are actively collaborating with colleagues, it's a good practice to store data in a format that can be easily shared and fully edited. On the other hand, once you publish your research, you may want to save your data to a format that's much more stable. For example, while you may want to work with the PowerPoint file while you're creating a joint presentation, you might save it as a PDF once you have delivered it. And then finally, if you're saving data to a temporary file only to import it into another piece of software, you may not need to worry about the long-term use of the temporary format at all. Ultimately, you want to choose a format with functions that support your research needs. And to be safe, you want to save versions of your final content in multiple formats in order to spread your risk across multiple software platforms. So how do you start to make decisions? How do you know what type of file format is likely to be stable or to last for a long time? Again, the choice of file formats is going to depend in part on your field, your subfield, or your specialization workflows. But even within that range of options that you'll have available to you, depending on what type of work you're doing and what field you are in, there are two potential resources that you can use to help you make informed decisions about file formats. The first of these is called the Sustainability of Digital Formats, and the second is the Recommended Format Statement. And both of these were created by and are updated regularly by the Library of Congress. And what these resources do is they document the quality and the functionality of many file formats. And in a very helpful way, these tend to group things by the type of content that they can store. So by images, by video, by data, so that you can get a good sense of the options that are available to you. So let's talk for a moment about the resources that you use in your research. So this is not necessarily what you are producing in your research, but instead what you're using in order to draw some of the conclusions in your research. So some of your primary and secondary materials may be web-based resources. And if you're using website-based materials as evidence or as references, you really need to take precautions to ensure that when that content moves, changes, or disappears, you still have evidence of its existence. Note that I said when the content moves, changes, or disappears, not if. Content on the web is notoriously unstable, and other than a very select number of very deliberately made links, most content is going to move, change, and disappear over time. So some of the current tools that can help you ensure the longevity of these materials include two that I'm listing here, the Wayback Machine and robust links. You can also take screenshots of things, which gives you an image of what you were looking at on your screen at a particular time. Now, there are other tools available as well. PermaCC is one that I love. But these two, Wayback Machine and robust links, are two of the easier ones to begin to work with as you're doing your dissertation and thesis research. So in terms of conversion, one of the things that folks often need to do is move content, move your data from one format into another format. So for example, from Microsoft Word into PDF. And as you're doing this, there's a broad range of available tools, and some of those are safer than others. So these different options that you might have for that conversion process range across proprietary or kind of guarded black box solutions, freeware as it's called, and open source solutions, so ones where you can see more of the source code. If you're working with formats that are in broad use, you may have lots of choices. So again, to stick with my Microsoft Office example, there are lots of choices when you're working with a docx file or even a .doc file. But if you're working with more esoteric or domain-specific or older formats, your choices are likely going to be limited. And in some cases, you may have to perform multiple conversions in order to get content from its current format into the format that you prefer. So be aware that when you're saving a file in a different format, so again, using Word to save a PDF version of your docx file, that's a form of conversion that may transform your data in specific ways. And understanding the conversion options in these cases is really important. So in that example, Office Word to PDF, do you want the PDF to be a flat image, which makes it a smaller file, or do you want to maintain the text, which makes it possible to search the text and index the document? That makes a larger file. Both of these options are available, and either one of them may be appropriate according to your conversion goals. But if you're going to need to search the text or index the document in the future, you don't want to save it off as a PDF as a flat image, because then you've lost that ability to detect the text within the document. So ultimately, before you undertake any conversion, you'll want to identify what characteristics of your data are important to maintain during your conversion. So for example, are the colors in a document or image important? Is the pagination essential? What about the references? You'll want to test each of these after your conversion is complete in order to ensure that you have a conversion that will meet your needs. And this evaluation process may include things like comparing the size of an image or the length of an audio track before and after conversion. For helpful guides to these types of quality control characteristics, you can also visit the National Archives in the US, and they have a set of reformatting guides that are really helpful for this. And you'll find those in the bibliography of the guidance brief that goes along with this webinar. So let's get specific about PDFs, since many ETDs, of course, do have a PDF component. There are specific things that you need to be thinking about as you're saving off your PDFs. So one of those is embedded fonts. So you can embed all of your fonts as you convert your content to PDF. And you do that by selecting that option as you're making the conversion. So as you go to Save as PDF, you'll select Options, and then you can choose any of the PDF/A options, and they will make sure that your fonts are actually embedded. Now note that this is often an explicit requirement in the thesis and dissertation hand-in process, but the reason for it is that this makes sure that your font is going to look the way you intended it to look when future researchers view it. If you use a font that isn't automatically recognizable by the PDF reader somewhere in the future, and you don't have that font embedded, it can basically turn things into gobbledygook, or it can look and feel in very different ways than what you meant. So make sure you embed your fonts. You also want to embed your hyperlinks. So hyperlinks in a document really may not be maintained when that document is converted into PDF format. You have to actively choose to convert your hyperlinks in many cases, or else your PDF may contain blue text and underlines that signals that there's a link, but they may not actually have operative links to them, so that when you click on it, nothing happens. In order to ensure your document's links are live, pay attention to the settings that you use and make sure you select Convert Hyperlinks, usually in the advanced settings. Also, this is one of those cases where testing and evaluating after you've done a conversion is really important. Stabilizing hyperlinks is another important piece. So for every link that you include, we recommend that you use a web archiving tool, whether that be Robust Links or PermaCC or the Internet Archive's Wayback Machine, to stabilize the version of the content to which you are linking. So web-based materials are just, as I mentioned before, notoriously ephemeral. They often change, they're moved, they disappear entirely. And using a web archiving tool will help you to avert a range of problems, including content changes, link rot, and 404 errors that could compromise your research findings' legitimacy in the future. Just by way of explaining how easy this can be, if you go to the Wayback Machine, which the link is provided both in these slides and then also in the guidance brief, then you'll see a Save Now space and a little search bar, a little open bar. And all you have to do is take the URL of the page that you want to save and plug it in there and hit enter. And the Internet Archive will crawl that page and save it on that date at that time when you're asking it to do it. And then it will confirm to you that it has done so. So that way you know that on November the 27th of whatever year, that day, you have a corollary, an actual version of that content that you can always get back to. Now, another option that you have with PDFs is to store your supplementary files as part of the PDF file. So PDF as a format is sometimes used to bundle research materials, so lab notebooks and multimedia files, data sets, things of this nature, into one single PDF document. Embedding multimedia components within the full text document might seem like it would be helpful for keeping all your files together, but file formats change over time, and inevitably different components of your research are going to need to be converted or migrated to new formats in the future in order to be viewable. So as such, if you store them as separate but affiliated files, so embedding links to the multimedia within the full text and then including the multimedia as separate files in your package, that's going to help ensure their longevity. If you're required by your institution to embed your files in a PDF, be sure to use standard file formats such as BMP or JPEG or GIF or TIFF for graphics, MPEG for video, and WAV or MP3 for audio. So another piece is verifying your PDF/A compliance. So if you are using the PDF/A format, then you want to make sure that you use the Acrobat Pro pre-flight feature, and you just look under Edit to find that in order to verify that you really have complied with that standard, so that you know that this document will still be able to render as text and be searchable and indexable and all of those good things. And then finally, and most importantly, test everything. Don't leave anything to chance. Go through and test that your fonts are embedded. Test that you have hyperlinks that work. Test that your hyperlink to a supplementary material, one of the separate files that you have in your bundle, that actually works. Make sure and test everything that you can before you call it a day. So this is just a quick preview of a handout that is also available to you on the website where you gained access to this webinar, or the one that you saw on that very second page or the second slide of this presentation. So again, that's at https://educopia.org/research/ETD+, all one word. And this handout just gives you a very quick view of what we've gone over in this session. And the three main issues that you really should be familiar with at this point are, first and foremost, that the formats that you choose are going to make future access to your research either easier or more difficult. That the web-based resources that you use as evidence or as references need to be saved in a way that ensures their longevity. And the best way to do this is through some sort of web archiving, or at the very least, screenshots of the materials that you're using. And then finally, saving final versions of your content in multiple formats will allow you to spread your risk across multiple software platforms. So thank you very much, and best of luck as you carry on in your own work.